Ladies and gentlemen, I'm also pleased to be with you this morning and to have the chance to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Yusuf Mahbu Islam. He is a Vice Chancellor of Daffodil International University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Yusuf Mahbu Islam. Please welcome.
Thank you, Akil, and thank you, Professor Syed Hassan. And the organizers, thank you, and thank you for being present today. This morning, as they're getting ready, Fareed gave a very interesting question. What was the question? That the survey is being made. What is life about? Research in the United States. How are you perceiving life? Now, it's very interesting because I asked the same question to my students. What is life? How do you perceive life? So anyway, can I ask the audience this question? How do you perceive life, or what is life? It's a very important question. I'm quite intrigued how the people in the United States came up with this question. Any ideas? It's not an easy question. It's a very it's a very important, very hard to answer. But what I say to my students, I'll give you, hope this gives you food for thought. Like I refer to the painting Mona Lisa. Now the painting itself, it doesn't have life. But the painting is one of the most valuable paintings, most famous paintings in the world. But imagine that Mona Lisa was able to feel life. All right? What would Mona Lisa be feeling? How would Mona Lisa feel? If I say to you that Mona Lisa would be feeling the qualities of Leonardo, because every brush stroke that Mona Lisa has, because people talk about her smile, people talk about the way she looks in the painting, her eyes, okay, but whatever we talk about in the painting, it's all about brush strokes of Leonardo. Yes. So similarly, if we imagine ourselves, who has made our brush strokes? Allah. So life, if we draw a parallel, life is about feeling the qualities of Allah. Whatever we feel, when we smile, we are feeling the qualities that Allah has given. So life is about Allah. It's not really about ourselves. Just food for thought. Okay? So however we excel, it's another quality of Allah. So thank you for inviting me to be the keynote speaker, and thank you, Professor Hassan, for introducing us, and Professor Rozhan and the team coming from Bangladesh, DIU, and the people involved in taking photographs and everything. Thank you. So let me start. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The presentation is about what? Opportunities and challenges in the future of jobs. This was the title circulated. Now what I want to talk about today is this question here. Are we preparing our graduates adequately? Adequately for whom? For the job market, for themselves as human beings. So I'd like to discuss this question and try and find the answers. So it's basically, I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. Right. Now, very interestingly, as I went through the literature, way back in 1993, the US Organization on Educational Research, they instituted a study. And the study was published by Cotton. And this is 1993. And at that time, they were talking about the future of jobs. Just like we are talking about the future of jobs today, we're talking about employability. This is way back in 1993. And in the brochure, there's a definition of employability skills, but you will find that definition is from today. You go to the net, you go to the latest websites, you'll get this definition. But you'll notice that the definition is no different, not really different from what was done so many years back. And what they did, they went through 63 documents, research publications, government publications, employer statements, etc. And they summarized all the skills that came through the documents into basic skills, higher order thinking skills, and effective skills and traits. And the most important that they identify are these two skills here: dependability, responsibility, and a positive attitude towards work. So among all the skills that you see, the highest ranking were these two. And these, again, notice that the list here is longer. And these are all personal or interpersonal skills. Okay, this is to do with their hard subject skills, problem solving. This is also basic human skills. Right? So soft skills, the focus of soft skills is on personal and interpersonal skills. At Daffodil, we invited 36 employers to come to the university. And this was in 2016. And we asked them about the gaps that they noticed in the graduates that they employed. Not just Daffodil graduates, throughout the country. So these 36 employers, they wrote out these cards. Just look at if you can see whether this is visible. This says attitude, behavior, which is the same as we saw earlier in the 1993 one. This is analytical skills. And this is essential skills. Again, basic skills. This one is basic skills. What we see is an addition of all these extra things that employers have added. So it's not that whatever we are doing, the demands are reducing. No, the demands are increasing. And one of the increased is this one, tech savvy, which came out in one of the presentations this morning. They're looking for technical competence on top of use of social media, these kind of things. They're looking for these kind of skills nowadays. These are the title cards that represent all what the employers said. So notice, even after 23 years, it's the same thing. And interestingly, this is a study by Forbes. And this is as recent as July 12th. It was published on July 12th, 2018. Let's just read what it says. In fact, soft skills are quickly becoming the difficult skills to recruit for and develop in our organizations. And they're the ones that turn out our everyday work into hard dollars. It's time we take a fresh look at these soft skills to understand why they're more difficult to find and more valuable to build than ever. So this is an article, the reference is Why Soft Skills Are Harder Than They Look by Ekenberg, 2018. So employers are saying, and this is a study by Forbes, that it's becoming even more difficult. But for example, this previous slide, this is from 2008. And they, from the start, they started to integrate as part of the curriculum the soft skills. And these are the lists: communication, language proficiency, all these analytical. And this is by year of study for the bachelor's degree. So an effort is being made. People are trying, and in Malaysia, as far as I know, there are people who go in and audit. They audit the integration of these skills into the curriculum. So efforts are being made, But as you see from the Forbes study, that we're not quite there. And in a personal conversation with the Vice Chancellor of USIM, Professor Dato Musa, he says that our students lack in self-esteem. And interestingly, in Bangladesh, I was called by one of the departments who does postgraduate studies, and they asked me to give a motivational speech. So I asked why. Why do these postgraduate students who are studying masters, 150 of them, why do they need a motivational speech? So the person who called me said that they all lack in self-esteem. So I stood up on the stage and I said that your teacher, your professor claims that you lack in self-esteem. Can you raise your hands, those of you who feel, you think that you lack self-esteem? And you will not believe what happened. All 150 raised their hands. All of them, without exception. So the thing is, what are we doing? Are we, what is this fresh look that Forbes is talking about? What can we do? So what is happening? Are we going wrong in our approach to develop soft skills? What do we need to do? Do we need to take a fresh look at this? So Tang, there's another study, very recent again, Tang 2018, highlights the importance of teachers having the right set of soft skills. Like this morning, Lisa pointed out that if teachers don't have soft skills, how do you expect students to have that? Okay. Though it seems there's a lack of soft skills all around. So where are soft skills rooted? Any ideas? Because when we looked at the slides before, we saw this, right? So where is the root? This question I'd like to put to you. Where do you feel is the root of soft skills?
And so, sir, I feel that it's all about of our brain, human brain.
Human brain?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other terms? Basically, it's personal.
Yeah.
It's to do with the human being. What makes the person human? Yeah, okay. So, if I can proceed there, what I would like to propose at this conference, notice that the most important skills are the personal skills, right? And let us look at a quotation. This is by Maharashi. What does the quotation say? Your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. So what is he trying to say? What can this mean?
He's trying to say that the world will look at you as the same way as you imagine yourself, or as you think about yourself, realize yourself.
Right. Yes, but what does self-realization mean? Does it mean being yourself? Finding out, see, at the beginning of today we talked about being human, enjoying the qualities of Allah, right? What does that mean? See, each of us has a personality. To being human, but being who? Being the person that you are designed to be. What do I mean by that? Each of us has a different personality, right? And each of us is totally unique. If we can discover our own uniqueness, that would be our contribution. And you to develop that and give that, contribute that to the world, that would be the contribution. Because each of us fits in, just like, the spokes of a wheel. Each of us has a contribution to make, has a role to play in this world designed by Allah. So if we can realize that potential that we have, that would be our contribution, because then we will fit into the spoke, the design that Allah has done. This is very important to realize. I mean, in classrooms, we are trying to, because Farid spoke about learning styles. In classrooms, what are we doing? We're trying to get everybody to conform to the teacher's ideas, right? But we were not designed to do that. We are designed to be the individual that Allah has made us, the personality that He has given us, right? So this is what this quotation means, that if your own self-realization. So what does that mean? That we have to help our students to understand who? To understand themselves. Because they don't know themselves, right? Like Nahyan said, the brain. Now Allah has made the brain in a particular way. So my question is, unless and until we understand how the brain functions, can we utilize the full potential of the human being that Allah has made us? Because the brain is an integral part of the human being. So what I want to propose is this, that basis for developing God-made humans. The first thing to realize that we are made. Okay, so we are made in how Allah wanted to make us. He has made us in that way. So what do? The first thing that we need to get our students to do, and many philosophers, in the paper I've given you references, you can go through the reference, many philosophers have said this is the most important thing, is for the human being to understand himself or herself, that what am I? So that this is the first box. The next would be, how does the human brain work? This is the second important thing. So the students, as somebody pointed out this morning, they need to know what learning means. Right? Prof. Roseanne said that individual learning styles, students should go into looking at YouTube videos and other things, okay? But the student has to be motivated and to understand what learning is. Learning is not coming into the classroom just listening to a lecture. Learning is for himself or herself, to develop the human being. So this realization must be there. The third one, how should a teacher launch a class? So my proposal today as the keynote address is that we look at this model and see whether it makes sense and whether this is what is missing. So what I've done today is I'll go through these three, but I'll use references from the Al-Quran. Okay? For all of them, I'll use references and let's see if they match up and make sense. Basis for understanding self. Okay? We have to understand there's 2 points of view. Okay? And these 2 points of view may annoy some of you, but I would ask you to bear with me. The first point of view is God is created for our service. The second point of view is, or have we been created to serve God? This is very important. The difference between the two is important. Not what we're doing, but we have to understand the difference in God is created for our service. There's one quotation which says like this, that we create gods by the dozen, but we cannot create an ant. We cannot create a fly, but we can create gods by the dozen. Like if I give you the example from Bangladesh, okay? Let's say somebody needs a job and they get an interview card. So once they get the interview card, then they go down in salah, in prayer to Allah, that Allah, I need the job, please help me. But at the same time, they will go to religious leaders, pious men, and ask for, we call it tabij. I don't know if you have that in Malaysia. It's hung around the neck or on the... Then we ask for some special water, which has been blessed by the pious person. Holy water. Okay. Etc. And then finally people say, no, all these things won't work because it is now the political party's show. So you have to meet a political person and get his blessing to get the job. Okay. So basically, this is what this means, but we'll look at it in more depth. Or have we been created to serve God? These two questions are important. So let's think about these two questions. And which is the Islamic point of view? Now, to understand these questions, I have made a model. One or two of you have seen this model before, but I'll show you. But reference from the Al-Quran is this one. Have you seen he who has taken as his God his own vain desires? So I am pursuing God to fulfill my desires. Okay? So to understand this, I've made this model. Some of you have seen this before. So the focus of our education, what is the focus of our education? Self. Everything points to self. For example, we are taught that we have needs, wants, and desires. And most of these are fulfilled by materialism. And we are taught technology of how to create this material things. And those, especially in our country, I see that who perceive they don't have enough, go to corruption. And others approach anyone, including God, to serve self. In the example that I gave earlier, that we will approach everything to fulfill the need for the job, right? So the focus is self. I'm approaching God to serve me. I have needs and desires to serve myself. Materialism and corruption, everything is focused here. So this is where we are. If we can shift our focus a little bit to who? To God. What will happen then? I'm no longer the center of my life. If Allah becomes the center of my life, then there are some questions that I need to answer. For example, who am I? What am I? And this we spoke about our personality. But what is my personality? Why have I been made? Why have I been put in this society? Why am I in this school as a teacher? Or why am I doing this job? These questions. And this is the question, what is my purpose? How do I fulfill my purpose, my responsibilities? And then, once I start asking these questions, I'll be in a position to receive guidance from God. Now, by that, it can be the Quran. When you read the Quran, it starts to make sense. But imagine if you're here, you're focused on self. Will the Quran make sense? I'm just asking you to think about it. Because in Bangladesh, for example, we memorize the Quran. We read it every day without understanding a word. And then put it on top of the cabinet so that our feet don't touch it, etc. So we pay it a lot of respect. But do we understand it? Do we integrate it with our lives? Do we ask ourselves, why has Allah sent the Quran? Do we try to understand it? So it is just to get some points from Allah that I read the Quran, feeling that I'll get some points from Him. So you'll notice all our prophets, it is when they started asking questions, guidance came, practical guidance came. Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, he started asking questions. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started asking questions, which led him to go to Hira Parbat, right? And then he received revelation. But if, for example, if Prophet was focused on himself, would he be looking for revelation? Would he be looking for anything at all? Right. So then only, how can I develop my potential? This question will come up. And only then I can become, this term vicegerent, it's used in a translation by Yusuf Ali. Simply is deputy, Numainda, Khalifa, representative of God. But here, I simply represent myself. But here, I can represent God, because I need to know who God is before I can represent Him. So I just put together this model, basically to try and understand this. Have you seen he who has taken as his God his own desire? So, this is just food for thought, to think where we are. The next is this one. How does the brain make sense of words? So this is another thing I put together just to understand. Some of you have seen it before. So here we have 2 ears listening to the lecture, just like all of us are listening. But one ear belongs to a human and the other belongs to a monkey. After I show you the model, I'll show you the ayahs from the Quran. And both are listening to a lecture. And the lecture is in what? In sounds and videos. So the question is, will the monkey be able to hear the sounds? Of course, the monkey has ears bigger than us actually, maybe clearer. And where will it go? To the monkey's brain. What about the human being? Will the human being able to hear? Yes, but as long as the human being in class is not on Facebook. So it'll go to the human brain. But here is the problem. This point here, up till the point here, is there any difference between the two, the human and the monkey? Is there any difference? Before the point it enters the brain, what the monkey does, we don't know. But here, up till this point, is there any difference? It's the same. So if we want to make a difference, where will the difference have to be made? In the human brain. So the difference has to be made by the human in the human brain. So this is what perception means. It's my own idea of the world. It's nobody. Whatever other people say, it doesn't have any effect unless and until I do something inside there. Right? So what do I do inside there? So one of the things is to apply meaning to the sound that is coming in. So how can I do that? So one of the ways to do that is to ask questions inside myself. And it can be very simple questions. What does this sound mean? How does it apply to me? How do I apply it to other things? As you know, it's basic. Then these questions can become complicated. But you will notice that how do inventors work? Like Edison. How did he come up with a light bulb? Anybody know? When we look at Edison's work in Wikipedia, Wikipedia says that he went through 3,000 experiments designed for the light bulb. But what did he start with? He started with 2 questions. The question was not simply light, because everyone perhaps used a matchstick or somehow got some light, or used hurricane, these gas or oil lamps, etc. So light was there. So his question was not how to bring light. His question was, how can I extend the light, extend the life of this so that it doesn't extinguish so quickly? And in pursuit of answering that question, he and his team designed 3,000 experiments. The question is, where did those experiments come from? From his brain and the team's brain. So that means what? Everything is in the brain. Here the question I've put is, if so, how can effective learning be implemented? So effective learning has to be that our students must have the ability to ask questions themselves. Okay? So the Quranic ayats, let me go to them. This is one of the ayahs. What does it say? So it's a Surah Baqarah, ayat 31. But we just need to look at what is in red. And he taught Adam the names, all of them. Now what can this mean? What could names mean? This is a translation by Abdullah Yusuf Ali, and he used this term, names. What could it be? Concepts of everything. Now if Allah has put concepts of everything inside Adam's brain, what does he mean by that? And if everything is in the brain, it was in Adam's brain, it also means that it is in every human being's brain. It doesn't mean that Allah, gave it to Adam, gave it to Edison, gave it to Einstein, and deprived us. Okay, it means everyone has the same. So how do we bring it out? The way to bring it out is in the ayah 33, Surah Baqarah 33. And he said, Adam, tell them their names. So essentially, Allah asked Adam, he asked questions, and Adam responded with the concepts that Allah had already put in. Now notice 2 other things here. He presented them to the angels and said, tell me the names. So Allah also asked the angels. The question here is, did not Allah know that the angels could not answer? Of course. The ayah in between actually says the angels could not answer. But why did he ask this question then? It is to show the difference between the new creation, that he had taught Adam all the names. He had to show the difference that the angels do not have the same ability of question and answering, knowledge processing, bringing out answers from knowledge. So if we go back to this slide here, the question is, if we ask questions inside our brain, why does it work? Why should it work? And then how should it work? If we draw a parallel, like we use search engines, we use Google. Okay, what do we do with Google? We enter a query or a question. It looks up thousands and thousands of websites and presents us. Then we have to go through each website to check the one that we need, find the one that we need. Right? So isn't this the same that Edison did? He went into his brain, found these 3,000 designs, checked each one, and came up with the one that suited his needs or suited what he was looking for. So our brains are the same. So if you can imagine everyone's brain having all the knowledge and you have a search engine, and you ask this search engine a question, it'll find many answers, and you have to find the right one. So this is the second part of the model. So if we try and link this with what science says that you are born with at least 100 billion brain cells called neurons. And your personal neurological network grows more and more massive with synapses connecting the neurons with each new piece of information learned. So how can we link what Allah is saying in the Quran with neurons? It's quite a leap, but let's imagine that we have 100 billion neurons, and science says each neuron has the capacity to make 10,000 links. So each neuron can actually make 10,000 synapses with other neurons, right? So the brain is about linking one concept with another. So the question is, do we teach our students to link concepts in their brain, right? So we have to encourage our students to do that, and that is only when we can make them independent. So that's the reference. This one, I showed this to Professor Roseanne once, and he said it's quite involving. But I'd like to share it with you, see if we can make sense of it. And the reference here is God taught Moses how to face Pharaoh. Surah Taha 17 to 28. So my question was that, can I find some reference in the Quran of how a teacher should conduct a class, taking into account how Allah has created the brain, right? So this is the answer I found, okay, which I'll share with you. So if we imagine the brain to be neurons, like science says, so these are clusters of neurons. Now each cluster, if we think of these as data centers. Now what do I mean by data centers? Neurons connect with each other, concepts. So let's just imagine that this is Moses, Hazrat Musa's existing neuron clusters. And he was going to have a conversation with God on top of the mountain. Here, if you look at the bottom cluster here, so Hazrat Musa actually made a rod from him, a stick for himself, a rod. From a tree, he cut it, he made it fit for his use. So everything to do with a rod would be in this cluster. How to cut it, how to shape it, what it does would be here. So this cluster would all deal with his rod. So what other clusters would Moses have? For example, he moved around in the desert and he came across snakes. So let's say this cluster deals with snakes, the fact that they're poisonous, what a snake looks like, etc. And then he had a brother, Harun, how the brother looks, what is his name, etc. would be here. And finally, a cluster, so just we look at 4 clusters. Finally, Pharaoh, that he was a tyrant, he oppressed people, etc., would be this cluster. So a new cluster would be formed when he met with God. New connections would be made. So let's assume that those connections, these neurons would connect. So the first ayah, notice the first ayah. It says, this is ayah 2017. And what is that in your right hand, O Moses? So we have to imagine, if we imagine this scene, that Hazrat Musa went up to the mountain, and he was standing there with the rod in his right hand. And a voice spoke from a light. Okay? Now the voice said this, and what is that in your right hand, O Moses? Now this is very important. First of all, it's a question. Okay? So he opened his conversation with Hazrat Musa. Allah opened this conversation with a question. Did not Allah know what was in his right hand? Of course he did. So why did he ask this question? Okay, so that's the question, why did he ask this question? But to answer the question, which cluster would Hazrat Musa have to refer to? This cluster? Because this question dealt with something that is already inside Hazrat Musa's brain. Right? So just like when we try and update a website, we have to first find the website. So we enter a query, the computer finds the website, and then we can update the website. So to answer the question, Musa would have to refer to this cluster. And this is ayat 2:18. He said, "It is my rod, on it I lean." And he goes through many other multiple uses of the rod. He says that he takes down leaves and he pats down the leaves, etc., etc. Quite a number of uses. But where would the uses come from? All from this cluster here. Notice, so this reply is from there. Then the next one. So once he is there, Musa is ready for a new experience. So Allah says, "Throw it, O Moses, throw the rod." So now the brain is here, Musa throws the rod. What happens to it? It becomes a snake. So when it becomes a snake, it has to what will happen in the brain? This is a new experience for Hazrat Musa. He's never seen a rod become a snake before. So a neuron has to link between this cluster here and the rod cluster. So the next, he threw it and it was a snake. So this cluster links here with the new synapse. It was a snake. So now in this cluster, Musa is scared. But Allah knows that Musa will be scared. So he says that the next one, "Seize it, hold it, and fear not, because it will return to being a rod." Right? But notice the sequence of these ayahs. They go through this operation. Right? And finally, after training, finally Allah says in ayah 20-24, go to Firaun. So the whole purpose of his exercise was to take this new experience to Firaun. The reference I found on how to deliver a lecture. So basically the lecture, the teacher has to know how the neurons work. Next, way forward. What we have to do is network together and work together to find ways to allow our students to examine the approach to God, to situate himself and herself. This is very, very, very important. And this, in another sense, also has to deal with the ego. If I can go back just to show you what I mean by ego. These two ayahs. Does anybody know what ayah follows this? This is 2.33. Any ideas? When Allah created Adam, he had the angels and Iblis witness the creation of Adam. Right? So the next ayah says, bow to Adam. After this. Okay? Now, what was Iblis's response? He did not bow. He said, Adam is made from clay and you have made me from fire. So I am superior. But my question here is Allah talking about fire and clay? What is Allah talking about in these verses? He is talking about knowledge, the fact that he gave Adam knowledge, the fact that Adam can respond with knowledge processing. But when he asked them to bow, he's asking them to bow to knowledge processing, not to the body of Adam. Because before Adam, Allah had created many such bodies, like gorillas, monkeys, and dinosaurs, many types of bodies. But the problem is Iblis could not see this fact because of his arrogance. He could not see what Allah was talking about. He could not see the truth because of his arrogance. So this is important, that if we are involved with our ego, we cannot see the truth. We are blind to the truth. So allow students to examine the approach to God to situate themselves. where they belong. Second, develop and introduce a teaching methodology based on Al-Quran guidance. How the brain is structured, how the brain is made. Third, to develop methodologies to help teachers develop themselves, because we need teachers to develop as well. And subsequently, get teachers to approach students to help them develop in a similar manner. Development of teaching methodologies. So at Daffodil, we have been trying to experiment and with developing methodologies based on guidance given in the Al-Quran. So you'll see some of the presenters have already presented. And one of the team has suggested this name. Our team has named the methodology Effective Neuralistic Engagement Method. The team is here to share their application results. So you may be interested to visit the paper sessions that practically use this methodology and see the results. Thank you for inviting me.